Nobody in that dusty saloon realized they were sitting next to the deadliest gun in the West. A withered stranger nursed cheap rot-gut whiskey, enduring mockery without a single word, and the men around him mistook that silence for weakness because they had never met the kind of quiet that comes from having nothing left to lose. Silence was his steel, cold, sharp, and patient. At first, he was just background noise, another old-timer spending his last coins in a place that smelled like sweat, smoke, and bad decisions. Then his stillness grew heavier than lead, as if the air itself was being packed tight into a bullet, and that weight turned into a death sentence that everyone in the Black Ace Saloon signed without reading. The room raged with drunken laughter and thick cigar smoke. It was 1884, and the town of Copper Ridge lived under the shadow of one man, Victor Kane, the ruthless leader of the Wolf Kane's gang. He controlled every corner, every business, every drop of whiskey poured. Where his boots landed, fear followed like a faithful dog, and the town learned to keep its head down because heads that lifted too high tended to end up on the wrong end of a rope. But tonight, something broke the pattern. At the corner table sat a man who did not belong. Nathaniel Cross, 68 years old, silver hair like moonlight rubbed dull by dust, skin weathered and tough from decades under a merciless sun. His clothes were plain, his posture unshowy, his face worn like an old saddle. Yet his hands were steady despite their age, not steady in the way of a peaceful man, steady in the way of a man whose body remembers violence, the way lungs remember air. Nobody understood what an old-timer like him wanted in a hellhole like this, and that confusion gave the room permission to be cruel. Victor Kane noticed him the way a predator notices a pause in the herd. Kane sized him up with contempt. An old fool, a relic, a little piece of history that had wandered into the wrong decade. He approached slowly while his gunman laughed, already knowing what came next, because in Copper Ridge humiliation was entertainment, and Victor Kane never missed a chance to remind people who owned the story. Kane grabbed the stranger's bottle and poured the whiskey over his head. It ran down Nathaniel's brow, clung to his lashes, soaked into his collar. The saloon howled. "Welcome to hell, Grandpa," Kane sneered. "I run this town." Nathaniel did not respond. He did not wipe his face. He did not bow his head. He stared at his empty glass, as if the insult had landed somewhere far away, and for a few seconds the only sound was whiskey dripping onto wood. That was the moment the laughter began to sound nervous, because men who bully for sport need reaction the way fire needs oxygen. Kane leaned closer, searching for anger, for shame, for anything he could hold and squeeze. He found nothing. The silence stretched, then tightened, like a rope pulled taut. Something shifted in the room, subtle but unmistakable, the way a bar goes quiet when a knife hits the table. One of the gunmen swallowed and whispered to another that the old man's eyes looked wrong, like a storm behind glass. Kane shoved the table just to prove he could. The glass toppled and shattered on the floor, and the sharp crack of it made the room flinch as if it had been struck. Still, Nathaniel did not flinch. He only raised his gaze for an instant, and that calm stare was frozen and hollow, a stare that did not belong to any ordinary cowboy. It belonged to a man who had already died once and decided to keep walking. Before you discover how a 68-year-old man became the nightmare of 25 gunmen, take a moment to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment telling me which country you are watching from right now. United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Australia. I want to know where the legend is reaching. Buckle up, partners, because what Nathaniel Cross is about to unleash in Copper Ridge is not just revenge. It is a death sentence written in gunpowder and blood, and it is going to be carried out one name at a time. Copper Ridge was a town God forgot, and the devil remembered fondly. 3 dirt streets, a bank, a church without a preacher, and a saloon that never closed. Law had passed through years ago, but never stayed. Outlaw territory, and Victor Kane was its uncrowned king. 2 years back, Caney and his crew burned the sheriff's office and hanged the mayor from the telegraph pole. Since then, nobody dared challenge them. They collected illegal taxes, stole cattle, broke men for fun, and took women like property. The town breathed fear, slow and shallow, like it was afraid the wrong breath would get it killed. Nathaniel Cross arrived on Tuesdays. Stagecoach. No luggage, no visible weapons, just an old saddlebag and a worn hat. He paid for a room at Widow Harrison's boarding house with tarnished silver coins and the kind of politeness that felt like distance. He spoke to no one, asked no questions, simply watched. Curious, the widow asked where he came from. Nathaniel answered in a gravelly voice, "From a place that does not exist anymore." That first night, Nathaniel ate alone in the saloon, whiskey in one hand, jerky in the other. Men shouted, played poker, smashed bottles. One brute, Razor Jim, noticed the old man and saw an easy laugh. "Look here, boys, fresh meat," he announced, stumbling over drunk, snatching Nathaniel's hat off his head and holding it up like a trophy. "Old-timers do not last long here, Grandpa. You came to die." Nathaniel chewed slowly, eyes steady, then replied in a glacial tone, "I came to settle accounts." Razor Jim laughed harder, as if the words were a joke meant for him. Settle what? Old debts. The kind paid in blood. For a heartbeat, the room dipped into a strange quiet, the way a crowd goes still when the first drop of rain hits dust. Razor Jim frowned, confused by the chill behind the words, then spat into Nathaniel's plate and staggered back to his table amid laughter that came a little too forced. Nathaniel wiped the spit with his sleeve, finished his meal, dropped coins on the table, and walked out. Before crossing the door, he paused and looked back at the gunman's table. His gaze lingered on each face, not angry, not pleading, just measuring. Memorizing them one by one, the way a man memorizes names on a list he intends to cross out. Outside, under the yellow glow of oil lamps, cold winds swept the streets. Wooden doors creaked. Shadows stretched across the dust. Somewhere in the past, the name Nathaniel Cross had been whispered in fear, a name spoken like a curse, a name that carried the taste of metal. Terrible. A legend the West tried to bury and failed. What deadly secret did this old man hide? Keep watching. Widow Harrison's boarding house smelled of soap and old timber. Nathaniel climbed the stairs slowly, each step measured, not because he was weak, but because he lived by control. His room was simple, a bed, a chair, and a window overlooking Main Street. He sat on the bed and pulled from his saddlebag the only valuable thing he carried, a yellowed photograph worn soft at the edges. In it, a young lawman with a badge stood beside a beautiful woman holding a boy of about 10. Nathaniel traced the woman's face with his finger. His eyes moistened, but he did not cry. He had not cried in decades. The last time was 1871 when he found his home burned and his wife and son buried under the ashes, their names swallowed by smoke, their bodies reduced to something he could not even hold. The culprits were a gang of railroad enforcers who cleared land by any means necessary. Nathaniel tracked them for 3 years, finding them one by one. None died quickly. None died clean. And when the last man stopped screaming, Nathaniel vanished. He became a legend, the silent rider, the gunslinger who never missed, who killed without mercy, who left only silence and death, and who disappeared into the mountains like a ghost, ashamed of what it had become. For decades, he hid in the high country, living as a hermit, trying to forget the taste of vengeance and convince himself he could outlive his own fury. Then 4 weeks ago, a dying traveler stumbled to his cabin begging for water. Nathaniel gave him what he could, but death had already placed its hand on the man's shoulder. Before he died, the traveler spoke of Copper Ridge, of Victor Kane and his men, and mentioned a name that froze Nathaniel's blood. Marcus Sutton, the only man who had escaped Nathaniel's vengeance 16 years ago, the planner, the torchbearer, the one who ordered Nathaniel's home burned while they slept, the one who had watched a family beg and chose fire anyway. And now Marcus Sutton was Victor Kane's right-hand man. Nathaniel removed his boots and lay down fully dressed, staring at the photograph. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from muscle memory. His fingers remembered the weight of a revolver, the exact trigger pressure, the smell of oil, and the moment a life leaves a body like air leaving a punctured lung. Outside, the laughter of the saloon continued, unaware that the silent rider had awakened. Copper Ridge had just signed its death warrant. The storm was coming. Morning came with a brutal sun, turning the streets into mirrors of dust. Nathaniel woke before dawn as always, stretching with precise, deliberate movements. Every joint protested but obeyed. He went down to the kitchen where Widow Harrison had prepared coffee. "Morning, Mr. Cross," she whispered. "Never sleep well, ma'am, but survived another night," he replied. She served him black coffee and bread. As he ate, Nathaniel watched the street. Caney's men were already prowling, collecting taxes from merchants. One thug beat an old shopkeeper who could not pay. The man fell. Nobody intervened. Nathaniel gripped his cup tightly. The widow noticed the change in his eyes and the way his jaw set like stone. "Do not get involved, Mr. Cross. Those men kill for fun." Nathaniel did not look away. "I know," he said. "I used to do the same." The widow paled and said nothing more. Nathaniel stepped outside. The sun hit his face as he strode toward the market. The shopkeeper still lay bleeding. The brute who attacked him, a massive man called Ox, laughed with his buddies. "Hey, old man, that merchant owes me respect and you are sticking your nose where it does not belong." Nathaniel straightened slowly, back cracking. "This man owes you nothing, and I owe you less." Ox laughed and drew his revolver. "You got any idea who you're talking to?" "Yes," Nathaniel said. Serene, a dead man walking. Ox frowned, confused, because threats usually come with heat, and Nathaniel's came with ice. But the older townspeople, the ones who remembered stories of the silent rider, felt a chill. One drunk, Pete, whispered, trembling, "God help me. That old man, is it him?" Nathaniel did not move. He simply waited. Inside the saloon, Marcus Sutton saw him through the window. Recognition froze him. The past had just caught up. Marcus dropped his whiskey glass. Crystal shattered on the floor, but he did not notice. His eyes were locked on the old man in the street, on that jagged scar along his jawline, on the posture that did not belong to an ordinary drifter. "Cannot be," he muttered. "We left him bleeding in the desert." But they had not killed him, and Marcus knew it. For 16 years, Marcus had run from that truth, changing his name, changing his allies, joining gangs like hiding places. He always knew one day the ghost would come for him. Now the ghost was standing in sunlight, calm as a grave. In the street, Ox kept his gun aimed at Nathaniel. Victor Kane emerged from the saloon, alerted by the sudden silence. "What is happening here?" he demanded. Ox answered without lowering his weapon. This old-timer stuck his nose in. Caney sized up Nathaniel, an unarmed old man in ragged clothes standing firm. "You crazy old-timer," Caney said. You want to die? Nathaniel met his gaze with icy calm. Do not want to die. Looking for someone. Who? Caney asked. Marcus Sutton. The air froze. Caney frowned. Some of his men glanced toward the saloon. Where? Marcus stood paralyzed at the window. Do not know any Sutton, Caney lied. Yes, you do, Nathaniel said. And he knows me. Marcus stepped out slowly, hand brushing his revolver but not drawing. Fear he had not felt since youth gripped him so hard it stole his breath. Nathaniel Cross, he whispered, voice breaking. Thought you were dead. I was, Nathaniel said, until I learned you were still breathing. Caney looked at Marcus, confused. You know this old man. Marcus swallowed hard. He is the silent rider. In that instant, the entire town understood who Nathaniel Cross truly was. The man who had killed 40 men without losing a single duel. The nightmare that rode without a badge and left bodies like punctuation. Caney let out a dry laugh, trying to cut the fear with sound. The silent rider, that drunk fairy tale. He turned to Nathaniel with contempt. Look, old-timer, I do not know what stories got stuffed in your head, but I run this town. And if you want Marcus, you will have to go through me and my 25 men. Nathaniel did not look away from Marcus as if Caney did not exist. 25 men do not worry me. I have killed more for less. Caney stopped laughing. There was something in the old man's voice, a cold certainty, a calm only men who have stared death in the face countless times possess. Marcus stepped back, shaking. Victor, listen to me. This man is real. I saw him kill 8 men in less than 12 seconds. He does not shoot. He executes. You are paranoid, Caney spat, but it came out too quick, too sharp. The sound of a man trying to convince himself. Nathaniel spoke low, but everyone heard. I will give you one chance, Caney. Hand over Marcus. Let me finish what I started 16 years ago, and I leave. You and your men stay alive. You keep your town. Nobody has to die today. And if I refuse, Caney asked, then everyone dies, one by one, in the order I choose. Marcus will be last, so he watches his friends fall before him. Caney spat on the ground. This old man is crazy. Boss, let me blow his brains out, one gunman said. Caney raised his hand, stopping him, studying Nathaniel, searching for fear, doubt, hesitation. He found nothing, just an icy void in those gray eyes. You have until dawn tomorrow to leave town, Caney said. If you are still here, I will kill you myself. Nathaniel nodded slowly. Tomorrow at dawn, Main Street, you, me, and Marcus. May God have mercy on whoever survives. He turned and walked back toward the boarding house, leaving 25 armed men watching him go. Marcus slumped against the saloon wall, sweating, because he could already see the street filled with bodies, and this time he knew the bodies would not be strangers. That night, Copper Ridge did not sleep. It held its breath. Behind shutters and curtains, people prayed not for a miracle, but for the violence to pass them by. Marcus sat in a corner with a bottle he could not taste, staring at his hands, remembering the heat of the torch, remembering the screams that had followed him for 16 years, and realizing the screams were finally about to find their way home. Caney pretended to drink and laugh, but his eyes kept sliding toward the street as if he expected the darkness itself to walk in, wearing an old hat. Dawn broke red over Copper Ridge. The sun had not risen when Nathaniel descended the boarding house stairs. He wore 2 revolvers in leather holsters, hat pulled low. Steps firm and rhythmic like a soldier marching into his final battle. Widow Harrison waited with coffee, her hands shaking. You do not have to do this, she whispered. Yes, I do, Nathaniel replied. He drank it in one gulp, leaving silver coins on the table. If I do not return, this covers my room and burial. The town was deserted. Windows were shut. Nobody wanted to witness what was coming, because witnessing makes you part of the story. And Copper Ridge had learned to survive by staying out of stories. Nathaniel strode to the center of Main Street and stopped in front of the saloon. The horizon began to bleed light, painting the sky the color of fresh wounds. The saloon doors burst open. Victor Caney emerged first, then Marcus Sutton, pale and trembling, and behind them 23 men, rifles, shotguns, revolvers, all aimed at one old man. Caney smiled like a man trying to borrow courage from his own teeth. "Last chance, Cross. Mount a horse and ride. You do not have to die today." Nathaniel spat into the dirt. "I have been dead 16 years. Today I finished the job." Caney gave a signal. His men spread out in a semicircle. This was an execution dressed up as confidence. "Got any last words?" Caney asked. Nathaniel looked Marcus straight in the eyes. "Your boss ordered my family burned alive. You held the torch. They begged for mercy. You gave them fire." Marcus closed his eyes, tears streaming. "I did not want to," he stammered. "But you did," Nathaniel said. Absolute silence. Caney raised his hand. Aim. 23 weapons lifted, metal glinting in the early light. Nathaniel did not move. Hands hung at his sides, relaxed near his revolvers, ready. The wind seemed to stop. The world held its breath. Caney's hand started to drop. Fire. Nathaniel moved, and in that instant history was written. His hands became a blur, both Colts clearing leather with a sound like a promise being kept. The first man fell before his finger could finish the thought of pulling a trigger. The second collapsed with a hole in his throat, choking on the command he never got to obey. Gunfire erupted late, sloppy, panicked, because panic is what you get when you realize you are not hunting a man, you are facing a method. Bullets tore into dirt where Nathaniel had been because he was no longer there. He rolled sideways, slid behind a water trough, and came up firing with precise, measured judgment. He did not spray shots. He placed them. One shot, one fall. Another shot, another fall. A rifleman tried to reload and died with the cartridge still between his fingers. A shotgun roared and blasted splinters off the trough inches from Nathaniel's face, and Nathaniel did not flinch. He shifted, rose, and put a round through the shotgunner's chest before the smoke could clear. Men tried to flank and found only death waiting at the corner, because Nathaniel had mapped this street in his mind the moment Caney named the time and place. He moved from cover to cover like he had done it 1,000 times, because he had. The gunmen shot at shadows while their partners dropped one by one. In less than a minute, the semicircle broke into a scattered line of fear. 15 men lay dead or dying in the street, their blood darkening the dust like spilled ink. Caney retreated toward the saloon, frantically reloading, screaming that the old man was the devil. Marcus stood paralyzed, unable to draw, unable to shoot, watching the past collect its debt with interest. The last 8 men tried to rush together, desperation turning them stupid. Nathaniel stepped forward instead of back, and that decision ended them. 2 dropped to chest shots that stopped their hearts mid-stride. Another fell with a round placed clean between the eyes, not cruel, just final. One man fired and grazed Nathaniel's sleeve, hot metal kissing skin, and Nathaniel did not even look at the wound, he looked at the shooter and ended him. The last few hesitated, and hesitation is death, when the man in front of you does not hesitate. They fell in a row, bodies hitting dirt like sacks of grain. Then there was silence again, thicker than before. The kind of silence that comes after a storm when you realize what the storm removed. Caney stood alone now with Marcus at his side, surrounded by 23 bodies. Nathaniel walked toward them slowly, not triumphant, not rushed. Inevitable. He stopped 20 paces away. 23 dead, he said. 2 left. Marcus dropped to his knees, sobbing, because he knew he deserved what was coming, and he knew there was no place left to run. "Do it," he whispered. "End this!" Caney raised his last revolver, but not at Nathaniel. He aimed it at Marcus, eyes wild. "If I am dying, I am taking this traitor with me." His finger tightened. Nathaniel's gun cracked once, a cleaner sound, a sharper end. Caney's head snapped back. A single hole bloomed between his eyes, and he fell like a man whose soul had been cut loose. The shot Caney meant for Marcus never landed. Marcus remained on his knees, shaking, staring at Caney's body as if he could not understand how fast a king becomes meat. Nathaniel kept his revolver raised for a heartbeat longer because experience teaches you not to trust gravity to finish anything. Then he lowered it. "That was for my family," he said, voice quiet, like the words were meant for someone far away. He looked at Marcus. "You get to live." Marcus's face twisted in disbelief. Nathaniel's eyes did not soften. Not forgiveness, punishment. You live with it. You wake up with it. You carry it until you rot. And every time the wind smells like smoke, you remember what you did. Marcus broke, crying into the dust, because death would have been easier, and he knew it. Nathaniel holstered his weapons and turned away from the bodies like they were not the point. Down the street, a black horse stood waiting, calm as if it had been promised this ride long ago. Nathaniel mounted without ceremony and rode toward the sunrise. The silent rider disappeared into legend. Copper Ridge was finally free, but freedom came soaked in blood, because that is the only currency tyrants understand. 23 men lay dead in the dust of the town. One broken soul was left alive to choke on mercy that felt like a chain. People began to open their doors slowly, peering out like animals after a fire. They saw the bodies, the shattered weapons, the blood trails, and the empty space where Victor Kane's shadow used to be. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They simply breathed deeper than they had in years, as if air itself had been returned to them. Sometimes justice does not come from a badge or a courthouse. Sometimes it rides in on a black horse carried by a ghost who refused to stay buried. Stories of Nathaniel Cross would be told for generations, a man who could kill with a glance, whose vengeance was precise, and whose mercy chose its moment. Some said he vanished beyond the hills. Others swore they saw his horse at the edge of the desert when the moon was full. Maybe he still rides somewhere carrying the ghosts of his past, waiting for the next town that needs a reckoning. But one thing is certain. Where justice hesitates, legends do not rest. And maybe, when the wind blows through the canyon at dusk, you can still hear the faint echo of his revolvers, not as noise, but as a warning. Now tell me, partner, if you were in Nathaniel's boots, would you have forgiven Marcus Sutton, or would you have finished him too?